Hi, I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. And I have one of my favorite guests with me today, Rich Glorioso, Representative, Florida House of Representatives, District 62. Welcome back.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here back with you again. I always look forward to coming to the show.
The nice part is that, at least on the show here, I don't have to call you sir. Had we served in the military at the same time, and maybe we were there partly, I would have had to call you sir because you served quite a while in the military, didn't you?
I spent 27 years in the United States Air Force, had a great career, flew airplanes all over the world, and retired as a colonel. I was a group commander when I retired, had a logistics group. It was a really great career.
When did you start?
I went in height of the Vietnam War in 1967, volunteered for the Air Force, and then retired in 1994. Wow. 27 years.
That's quite a strand.
It is. We did a lot of great things. I started off in computers as a computer guy. And
really?
Yeah, I was a computer programmer, computer operator back in the late 60s.
What was your college? What did you go through ROTC to get a...
No, I didn't. I went to Northeastern University in Boston, which was a co-op school. It was a 5-year course, so that you worked a semester and went to school a semester, and it helped you pay for school. So you didn't have those huge loans that the kids have right now. You could kind of keep up with things. And I graduated with a math degree, and part of my work in school was in a bank as a computer programmer, and I had to take some courses earlier than that as a math major. So I had some computer courses, and I worked in the bank, and that's when I got hooked on the computers working in that bank, Waterbury Savings Bank in Connecticut.
Yeah, I managed the computer program we called the VAN program that NCR had, sending semis of computers over to Vietnam and going into the jungles with them. What a mess. Computers weren't near where they are today. And just keeping them from being too hot over there was a real challenge.
It is, and now our little phone has more capacity than the computer I had that would fill rooms 3 times the size of this studio. It's just amazing what's happened over the years.
So
but it was a great experience.
From a bank into the military then?
Well, it was the height of the Vietnam War, and my student deferments were running out, so I decided that it was time to join the Air Force. And so I joined the Air Force and went through officers training school, and then went in the Air Force in computers. I was a computer officer for 4 years in the Air Force.
Really?
I ran 2 complexes. I was the assistant director in California at Travis Air Force Base, and then when I expected to go to Vietnam in computers, they wound up sending me to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and installed their first computer complex there. And we were doing surveys on our missile sites, our Minuteman missile sites, and we would update the location of the missiles and send that tape to SAC every quarter so they could update their computers for their trajectories for the missiles.
I always like my listeners to get a little side picture into what their representatives do for real, what they've done, and how they got where they're at. So this is kind of part of that. It may sound strange to ask you what you did in the military, but you also flew aircraft, didn't you? How'd you get to the military airplane?
Well, when my wife and I got married in college, by the way. We've been married 45 years and got 2 boys and a great family. But when we decided after almost 4 years to stay in the Air Force, I said, I've got to go to pilot training. This is the Air Force. When I was 4 years old, I said I was going to be a pilot in the Air Force. And it's kind of like that.
Actually, there's a little brochure here that he brought in a picture of himself in a little uniform at 4 years old.
And when I turned 27 and cut off for pilot training was 27 and a half, I said, you know, if I don't try to do it now, I can never do it the rest of my life. And I applied for pilot training, and 6 months later, exactly the day I turned 27 and a half, I started pilot training. That was 1 year of probably the hardest education of your life. It was a 12-hour planned day, 6 hours of academics, and then 6 hours of PT and flying activities in the afternoon. Flew subsonic and supersonic jets, fully aerobatic jets. It was, you know, when you're flying at 700, 800 miles an hour, it's really exciting when you're the only one in the airplane. So,
well, you were a squadron commander and a variety of things, and you retired a full bird colonel, did you not?
I did. I was a full colonel when I retired. I was a logistics group commander when I retired. I had 5 diverse squadrons under my command. It was a great career. 27 years went by in a heartbeat. Had a wonderful time. We had a chance to live in Okinawa for almost 3 years. Lived in the Philippines for 2.5 years. Met great friends in both of those countries, and saw a lot of the world. And then in the meantime, after I came out of pilot training, I started flying cargo jets. So I was flying all over the world. As a matter of fact, I've landed a C-141 cargo aircraft on every continent.
Really?
Including an ice runway in Antarctica.
Now, 27 years, you decide you've got it made now. I've got my time in, I've got retirement coming. Whatever made you think to run as a state representative, get involved in politics? Was that the first place you got involved, was state representative?
Actually, I got involved as a city commissioner in Plant City. When I retired, initially I was going to go fly with the airlines, and I told my wife, I said, you know, I don't really want to do that. I want to give back. I want to do some volunteer work. So I did the volunteer AARP and IRS volunteer income tax program, doing taxes for low-income and seniors during tax season.
Oh, okay.
And worked with a military pilot organization out of MacDill called Order of Dedalians, and working with our junior ROTC programs in the high schools and their award programs. So I started doing volunteer work. After about 3 years of doing that and playing a lot of golf, I decided I needed to do a little bit more. And so I ran for city commission in Plant City and got elected after about 3.5 years of retirement, and spent 6 years as a city commissioner, and I enjoyed it. It was a great way to serve the people and try to do good things for the community. Again, a way to give back.
I've often questioned the sanity of anybody that gets into politics. So,
well, I was able to use a lot I learned in the military, and I understand that. You know, as a matter of fact, when I decided to run for the Florida House, I met a representative in Tallahassee, and he said, you know, there's only 4 types of people that run for state representative. He said, you're either independently wealthy, you're retired, you're crazy, or $29,000 is the most you've ever made in 1 year. And I said, I fit 2 of those. I'm crazy and I'm retired.
let's talk about the legislature. Unfortunately, I really don't like term limits, folks. I've said this on the air before, so it's no surprise, but you're being term limited out, and I think you've been a very effective legislator along the way. What are some of the highlights that you've seen over the past 8 years while you've been in the legislature?
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't sure what to expect when I went to the legislature. I knew I had a transportation background for the things I had done in Hillsborough County with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, having chaired that. I got hooked on foster kids as they age out of the system, and I spent a lot of time passing bills for those kids. After my first year in Tallahassee, when I met that group of young adults trying to make that transition out of the foster care system, I promised those kids, I only get 6 bills a year. I promised those kids I would run a bill every year for them while I'm in Tallahassee. And in my 8 years, I ran 8 bills for foster kids, and trying to help them become successful. It's a real shame what we've been doing to these young adults as they try to live through that system. And when you sit down and talk to 10 or 20 of them in a room and listen to their stories, you know that someone has to help. And I was really proud that I could be one of the people to get involved in that and make a lot of changes. You know, we had crazy laws on the books for our foster kids. We had a rule that said if you were a 12-year-old foster, let's say you're a boy, and there's a 12-year-old boy who lives next door to you, unless the foster parent went over with you, you couldn't play with that kid. Or we had to do a background check on the family.
Really?
Yeah. Would you do that with your own children?
Afraid not. Although I knew most everybody up and down the block.
Right. Well, and you may know them too.
Yeah.
But unless the state did a background check on that family, the foster parent had to be with you at all times. And so these kids would come in there and they'd say, I want normalcy. I want to be a normal kid. I'm 14 years old. I'm in high school. I want to be a part of the math club.
Right.
Well, if a parent volunteers in there, you can't go to that club because we got to do a background check on that volunteer parent. And so these kids couldn't take part in half the activities. And I did away with that law, I tell you. And I pray every night that nothing comes about because of that law change, because it helps these kids be normal. It helps them become more responsible for their actions. And so it was really good. We had another silly law. You know, our foster kids, we try to help, and we provide them a free education, vocational education and college.
Really?
And a stipend to cover living expenses. So we provide that for them because we've taken them out of the house and we've become their parents. And I stood in the legislature a couple of times on the floor of the House and said, folks, we're their parents. We took them out of their home. We took them away from everything they've ever had. But we had a law in the books that said if you were a 16 or 17-year-old foster kid and somebody wanted to adopt you or become your permanent guardian, we took away all their education benefits. We had kids turning down families because the system had been so bad to them. I almost used a bad word. The system had been so bad to them over the years.
Well, it's got to be frustrating.
That they didn't want to give up the chance of going to college for a family and not have it work out. And so we got rid of that law too. And within 1 month after changing that law, I know of 3 kids in the state of Florida in the local area that wound up with permanent guardians or adoption.
I'd like to know really how many of the kids that go into foster care end up in trouble with the law.
A majority of them.
You know, to me, there's that says something about the system right there.
Right. And that's what we try to change. And I don't know what the numbers are now. When I first got involved 8 years ago, it was the majority of them. They wind up in our prisons. They wind up as our prostitutes on the streets. They're doing drugs, breaking into our houses, because they have nothing and there's nobody helping them. Now, we've got a lot of agencies now that are working. We got Connected by 25 here in Tampa and others that are trying to help these kids make that transition. I worked on changing the laws that were holding them back from having that normalcy. They couldn't get a driver's license until they turned 18. Matter of fact, there was a law in the books that said because they weren't 18, they couldn't sign a lease. So the day they had to move out of their foster home at 18, that's the earliest they could sign a lease on an apartment.
Oh, great.
And so we changed that law. We made it 17 3/4
Okay.
to allow them to do that. And of course, just like unintended consequences, we forgot to let them turn on the utilities. So we fixed that the following year.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes the more you fix, the more something goes wrong. It's amazing the way things work out that way.
Yeah, it was kind of funny when the kids came up to us and say, hey, we can't turn on the power. And so we were able to fix that the following year. But everything we did was try to help these kids become normal, have normal lives, and help the agencies that are trying to help these young adults help these kids, because they just need that help. And I call everybody kids. So if you're younger than I am, you're a kid. Don't take offense at it.
Everybody's a kid.
Everybody's a kid, yeah. I called the governor a kid the other day at a bill signing he was doing for our unaccompanied youth. And I said, everybody's a kid. And I said, if you're younger than me, you're a kid. And I looked at the governor and I said, and Governor, you're younger than me.
Right. You got more hair. You know, the sad thing is that people do not realize. I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood in Detroit when I first came to the United States. And literally, we had nothing. I think my dad had 82 cents left when we moved into the United States, after he had paid for somebody to help us move over. And then he went ahead and paid that 82 cents to buy beer for the guys helping him. So we're pretty broke. And the whole neighborhood was that way. And they didn't have any hope.
Right.
And you know, I know it's become a joke, hope and change and all this, but if people don't have hope, they have nothing.
Absolutely.
And they'll do whatever is necessary to get whatever they need to have. We've got to give people hope. And these kids, they have to have hope.
You know, as I said, I've flown all over the world, and I've been in many of the third world countries. And that's what you find there. When you don't have any hope for tomorrow, that's when trouble starts. And we're running into that right now in our own country. You have to have hope. Everybody has to have that dream, though. You know, everybody has to dream that they want to have their own home, they want to have a job, they want to be successful. If they want to go to Disney, they have the money to be able to take their kids to Disney once in a while. All those things, you have to have that hope. And right now, the way the jobs are, that hope is not there for a lot of people.
It hurts.
And that's what I know the governor's worked on, and that's some of the things I worked on in Tallahassee. I had the privilege of chairing the Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations Committee, and in there we tried to work with our creating jobs and funneling money in the right areas to help that happen.
The trouble is we've become so polarized, though, that there's good people on both sides trying to do stuff, but the polarization of America, I've never seen it be worse.
Yeah, especially at the national level. In the Tallahassee level, it's not quite as bad up there. I mean, it's not as good as it was when I got there 8 years ago. It's also starting to change there. That's one of the bad parts. There's nothing I had more fun than having a debate on an issue with my colleagues in the back of the room, my Democratic colleagues. And we would go at it on an issue, and we would debate back and forth. And then we go up, and we put our arm around each other and say, okay, let's go get a cup of coffee, because we were friends.
Sound like a bunch of lawyers.
Well, it could be, but that's the way it's supposed to
That's
be.
the way lawyers are. They go beat each other up in court and then go have a drink.
Well, but that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. You know, there's
Without
only
animosity.
no, there's only a few fringe issues. The other 95% of the issues we all pretty much agree upon. Even if you look at the final
we ought
votes,
to work on those.
And that's where we need to focus on. You're right. And if you look at the votes in the House of the bills that pass, the majority of them pass with 110 out of 120 votes, and 115, sometimes 118, 120. I mean, most of them pass with huge numbers, except when we get to the fringe areas.
Let's move on to another area that is affecting you right now, and that's the requirement that you have to leave office. I don't like these term limits. I don't trust them. I think the ballot box, I trust the ballot box better than I trust arbitrary number of years. Is it true that it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years for somebody going to Tallahassee to really start becoming effective?
It takes usually a little longer than that.
Okay.
You really don't get effective to your 3rd or 4th year. The first couple of years, you're feeling your way through. I became vice chairman and chairman my 3rd and 4th year. I became chairman of the Transportation Committee. And then I became appropriations chair for my last 4 years in 2 different committees. But I was telling somebody the other day, I had a group of businessmen, and I said, here's what the Florida House is going to look like. Every 2 years, the most experienced person there has 6 years experience. How would your business run if you and all your employees, the most person had was 6 years experience? And they all kind of look and say, we'd fail.
All the corporate history is gone.
It's all gone. And that's the bad side of term limits. I think a 12 or 16-year term limit would be good. And I would love to see at least a 12, maybe up to 16, but at least a 12. I believe that you're seeing all these real nasty primaries that we just had is because they're all leadership races. You know, before we had term limits.
Oh, the Bergen-Lee race was a disgrace. Was just plain a disgrace.
We had a whole bunch of them statewide this time. And it's all because of the leadership. Because remember, these people are trying to become Speaker of the House in 6 years. The fight in the House was over who's going to be the Speaker in 2018. That's 6 years from now. And in the Senate, it's basically the same thing, although they've got more experience. But years ago, when we didn't have term limits, those speakers and House members, you didn't even get close to that till you had 12 or 14 years.
There you go.
And so it wasn't at the ballot box over electing the first term person like it is now. And it's in primaries. And we have Republicans attacking Republicans. I think that's wrong. We have Democrats attacking Democrats. I think that's wrong. So it has created a problem. And I think that I would hope that in a few years we could, the legislature would revisit it and we would get the people's support to at least look at going to a 12-year. I think a 12-year term limit would do away with a lot of the issues we're having.
I hear people all the time, especially on Facebook, you'll see people say, let's throw them all out and start new. Well, then you have the staff and the lobbyists in charge. Is that right?
Right now, you have the staff is very strong, and so are the lobbyists. I'm watching bills come up. This last year, I saw bills come up that we tried to kill 6 years ago, 8 years ago, with the new freshmen bringing up these bills that were just vendor-driven. There's nothing worse than a vendor-driven bill. Let's pass this bill so this one vendor can make a lot of money. Not whether it does good for the people of Florida, just so this one vendor can make a lot of money. Now, there are some bills that are really good where we've got vendors involved, where we're making government more efficient by giving it to vendors and putting it out for contract. But sometimes you'll see a bill come through and it's only for one vendor to make a lot of money. That's wrong.
I totally agree with you. But if you haven't been there long enough to know what's going on, you're at the will of the people who are leading.
Exactly, and that's what's happening right now. I think you're right on the term limits. It's a huge issue that needs to be addressed sometime, and I would hope they would address it in the near future. At least get it to 12 years. I think 12 years would be a pretty good compromise.
What do you see for the state of Florida in the future now? Given your time in the legislature, what do you see?
Well, fortunately, Florida has required a balanced budget. And that was passed years ago in our Constitution. That is probably the strongest thing that keeps our state so strong. You know, last year when the federal government bond rating went down, the state of Florida's went up. And that's because we balanced our budget. And having that requirement to balance the budget was huge. And we worked really hard. And sometimes people say, well, how come you cut education? How come you cut medical? Well, when you got a $70 billion budget and $20 billion is education, and $30 billion is medical, that's $5 out of every 7 go to those 2 areas. There's nothing else to cut.
Well, that's true. There is a lot there, but then I guess they're going to look at you and say, but wait a minute, then you give away giveaways to people who already have much.
Well, I'm not sure where you're coming on that one. Sometimes, you know, we don't have as many giveaways as you see from coming down from the federal government, because a lot of that is pass-through dollars. The unemployment is pass-through dollars.
Well, I'm thinking more of benefits for businesses and things of that nature that the governor has stressed very strongly.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword. A lot of times that helps build more jobs. I mean, what we have to do is get our people working. If you want to balance a budget, the federal budget, get this 20% of the people that are either unemployed or underemployed back to work, and the money will flow. And that's what we saw when Clinton was president, and we had a Republican Congress and Senate. And they worked together in the last part of the 90s, and they got people back to work. And when they got people back to work, they balanced the budget.
Now, you're pretty smart when it comes to mathematics and finances and things like that. And I'm probably walking way out on the end of, end of the plane. But in the past 10 years, the 1 and 2% of our population have increased their wealth by 350%. Well, most of us have taken a major cut. That money is pooling at the top right now. It's not being used to create jobs. It's not being put back into the economy. It's sitting there and going off to Bermuda or to Swiss bank accounts or wherever. Seems to me there's an imbalance here that's getting worse because of what government is doing. How do we get that money back into play?
Yeah, and it starts from the salaries they're getting. That's where it starts. You know, I know a lot of general officers, four-star generals, that have so much authority and responsibility. What, they make $200,000 a year?
Did you just see the one that spent that much in expenses?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, he kind of like the CEOs
Right.
of these major corporations. I mean, who's worth $50 million? Nobody, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm with you.
And so if the salaries were back reasonable like they used to be, then that money in those companies would be pumped back into the companies.
Apple's sitting on more money. Right now, Apple is sitting on more money than any other corporation in the entire world.
I know.
They're making 71% profit on the iPhone by producing it in China, getting tax breaks, and if they produced it here in the United States, they make a 50% profit on it. To me, 50% profit's a pretty good deal. But we give them more tax breaks to create jobs.
And the other issue we have is we have many of the federal government agencies contradicting each other. You know, if you want to, there was a company that wanted to double the size in the United States, but because of the pollution credits that they could get by moving overseas, instead of doubling the size in the United States, they moved the whole company overseas. Okay, so we have agencies that have rules that are contradicting each other. We've got to get that back under control. And I agree with you with the people that are making $50, $100 million. I think that's got to get those salaries down where they belong, where they used to be back in the 60s and 70s.
Breaks.
And I agree with you. And they're using the capital gains. Unfortunately, they found a way to use everything they get as capital gains, which is taxed at 15%. I personally, if I was king for a day, I would let them tax the first $1 million at 15%, and then everything else after that is ordinary income, and then they would be paying their fair share. But you know...
Well, I don't want to lose this good thinking. We've spent a lot of money on you over the last 8 years, educating you on government, and now this term limits is throwing you out of office.
Yes,
How
it
do we
is.
get our money back on you?
Well, you know, as I said earlier, I've had a great military career and learned a lot and enjoyed the Tallahassee time. I'm going to run for supervisor of elections for Hillsborough County. When I look at my logistics background that I have, it fits right in with running elections. My leadership experience fits right in with dealing with the 4,000 volunteers that we have. My security, having a top secret clearance in most of my career, understanding security as well as data or equipment is a huge issue, and I understand that side of it. So it really fits my background. And I told my wife I'm too young to quit. And I think I told you this once before, but I'll tell you again. When I retired in 1994, my wife stood up in front of about 300 people and said, "Dear, I love you very much. I married you for better or worse, but not for lunch." And so
she is a lovely lady.
So that's what we're going to do. We're running for supervisor elections. I think I bring a new leadership style. I've run a lot of organizations.
Earl Lender's been a pretty good guy, so...
Earl's done a great job. And Earl,
how do you differentiate yourself?
Earl's done a good job over there. I have a lot of experience in continuous process improvement, where we get the customers involved with the staff and looking at every process and getting the staff running the processes versus a top-down leadership or a directive leadership or an oversight. You get the people to look at how the job is being done and how it can be done better. But not only do you have the people in your organization doing that, you have the people in the community. If it has to deal with precincts, then you have people in the different areas come to you and talk to you about where do we put the voting, which churches do we use, which facilities do we use. If it has to do with outreach, we let the community tell us what type of outreach they need in their community. Every community in Hillsborough County is different. I don't care where you are, I don't care, every community is different, and every community needs different outreach.
When you speak of outreach, what are we talking about?
I'm talking about education. I would love to see us in the schools more. I would love to see us in the senior election for the senior president. I'd love to see the elections office there working with them, showing them the machines, how it works. As they're talking about a voting process, show them how the real voting process works for electing elected officials in our country, electing our president. So it's not foreign to them when they decide they want to go vote. Get them more involved in the process early. We're losing our young people. They're not voting. And that's a mistake. We got to get our young people involved. Our young people are our future.
You know what? One thing, and let's clarify that right now. A lot of young people think that if they register to vote, they're going to have to do jury duty. That's not true, is it? It's on your driver's license.
Yeah, right. It's on your they use your driver's license to do jury duty.
So they can either quit driving or not do it.
And they all have a driver's license.
So it has nothing to do with you and voting
Right.
or anything of that nature, so they should go ahead and register.
And jury duty is not bad. It's nothing wrong with jury duty.
Oh,
You
I
go there,
understand that.
And it's a civic duty. You know, I've done my jury duty, and you go there, and yeah, it's frustrating and it's time-consuming, but you know that you're there for a civic reason. You may be called in front of a case that may have to do with theft, may have to do with drugs, may have to do with sexual child abuse.
I didn't want to sidetrack you on that, but I did want to make it clear that signing up, when you mention young people, signing up like that is an important thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. So that's the outreaches to the communities, the neighborhoods, the businesses, and especially our schools to get our young adults involved more. So there's a lot of things I want to do there. I want to take the good things that have been done there under Earl Leonard. You know, your leader, it's interesting. I've been a staff officer and I've been a leader. And not all good staff officers make good leaders. But Earl Leonard's done a good job leading, creating the environment to make that organization run well. And so he's done a good job there. I want to build on what he's built and make it even better.
Well, one last thing, and we've got to leave, is that I want to ride in that new Cherokee that you've got. You're still licensed, and I want to go for a ride. I'm Bill Hodges. This has been Spotlight on Government. We've had Rich Glorioso, state representative from District 62 on with us today. Remember, you're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often because you are, you know, and we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. And Representative Glorioso, thanks for coming on and sharing all your background and knowledge with us.
Bill, thanks a lot. I always have a good time here, and I've enjoyed the time together.
It's been fun.
Yeah.